Welcome to Mershman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, we have a guest speaker from Corteva, Scott Jungman. He returns for an action-packed discussion on the specifics of using the Enlist system and why farmers like it. Check out the updated yield data on our website.
Hi, this is Joe Mershman. Welcome to Mershman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have Ben and Lynn. And Ben, you have a special guest, so I'll let you introduce him.
Yes, so we've alluded to the fact that we are going to be bringing the Mershman corn lineup back this year. And in that lineup, I think we've talked just a little bit about what trait products that we'll be using, which is the new Enlist Power Core corn from the Corteva background. So to talk about that and to go into a little bit more detail, we have Scott Jungman with us. He is an Enlist field specialist for the state of Iowa, and he works in the conjoining states as well. But I'd like to thank Scott for joining us this morning. Good morning, Scott.
Hey, good morning, guys.
Thank you for joining us this morning.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure to be with you, finally, red-clad fellows, the Mershman team. Thank you.
Awesome. So let's just jump right into this. We have it pulled up on the screen here. Let's talk about the Enlist weed control system and how that is going to affect guys that are going to be purchasing Mershman corn primarily in the 24 sales season, but that are going to be able to look and touch and see what it all looks like in the 23 season.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ben. And I'm gonna share a little bit on obviously the excitement we have around the Power Core Enlist launch that you guys are doing this year. Kind of maybe what you call a soft launch, preparing, like you said, for 24. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we make Enlist work the most efficacious. How do we get the best out of it in both corn and beans? And then certainly we'll share some more details a little bit on how to make it work specifically in corn for some of you that are going to be planting it this year. So the headline here, we were on over 50 million acres this last year when you count the Enlist soybeans and cotton and corn. 50 million reasons to jump on the bandwagon. So just quickly, the Enlist team, we think we've got a pretty powerful team of support people out there. Feel free to write these phone numbers down if you're not talking to the Mershman folks and you want to talk to one of us. I took calls last year from Mershman growers from Illinois and even one in Missouri. So I'm more than willing to be that person. But you see that there is another individual, Tony Gady's got Illinois there, the C, and B is Andy Carriger, who lives down in Jayhawk country. So the thing we are talking about with Enlist, and I think everybody's kind of getting on board with this, is this freedom to spray. My goodness, isn't it nice to get our sprayers back? When you first check the box, first you gotta be able to offer elite germplasm, and obviously in soybeans as we have, and now in corn. But we wanted to, obviously growers want a system where they don't have to worry about herbicide drift and volatility. And that's what we get with Enlist. We don't care if there's soybeans downstream, downwind. We don't care if there's corn or alfalfa across the fence. As long as you're on label, those crops can be there. And so freedom to spray, tremendous tank mix flexibility, along with it, proven track record with Enlist now. We're really getting into the groove, so to speak, understanding how this product works and how to get the most out of it. And I'll talk a little bit about that too. So we're in exciting times, and I'm excited to see that Mershman's getting on board here on the corn side. So in Enlist corn, it's kind of this is something I have to have a little fun with here, team. Because others are out there talking about their new traits that are coming down the road 4 or 5 years from now in corn, maybe in beans. And what we're saying today with Enlist corn, the future is now. I mean, we have a hybrid that you can spray with 4 different herbicide. It has 4 different herbicide tolerances. It has 3 different BT traits. I mean, this is Yield Guard Pro plus Herculex One. The Herculex One that brings you the black cutworm that you can get down there in southeast Iowa and Missouri and southern half of Illinois for sure. So the insect traits are there, and then you bring the 4-way herbicide tolerance to it. And of course, the way to think about the 4-way herbicide tolerance is you could almost call Enlist Corn E4. We won't do that. I'd probably get canned in 3 minutes if I went around talking about it too much. But it's the E3, which is glyphosate, glufosinate, which is Liberty. And in 2,4-D, it's an Enlist One and Enlist Duo. There's the 3 that are in soybeans. And then we add the FOPs. The FOPs refer to a group of post-emergence grass killers. Corn being a grass, they kill volunteer corn. So I'm talking specifically about a Sure 2 herbicide. It's a FOP. Another product that's used to kill volunteer corn in soybeans is a DIM, and that's like clethodim, what we spray and Select. When we spray and we tank mix for volunteer corn and soybeans, we use Select. It's the best, and it's a DIM. When we want to kill volunteer corn in our Enlist cornfields, though, the only one we can use is the FOP. And the FOP works just like the DIM, except Enlist corn, the Power Core Enlist that Mershman was offering has FOP tolerance, meaning that if you have a corn-on-corn situation and you have volunteer corn out there, you can now kill it by spraying it with a Sure 2. That's immensely powerful for that individual that wants to kill some volunteer corn. Or you got a situation, a terrible situation like the derecho a few years ago, and when we're just overrun with volunteer corn, that would be another situation in a corn-on-corn where you just almost would just think you had to use it. So the bottom line is you got the best in VT traits above ground, and you got the clearly the number one herbicide offering out there, the 4-way tolerance. And so I like to say the future is now. Any comments from you folks from the Mershman side as I keep moving along? The questions.
Having the Assure 2 is just definitely a handy option for the volunteer guys when they're coming 1 year out. Obviously, that if you're using corn on corn 2 years in a row with Power Core traits, it gets limited pretty quickly. But if you're bouncing back and forth between a regular Double Pro or a standard product that's out there right now, if you're bouncing back and forth, there's some definite handiness there from being able to clean things up.
Yeah, and then, of course, if you got volunteer corn in your Enlist soybeans and you planted Enlist corn the year before, then you just use that DIM. So use the Select. So you got everything covered with the system.
Great understanding, guys. And you brought up a good point, and that is if I was just going to plant Enlist corn followed by Enlist corn, that killing volunteer, you're not going to be able to kill the volunteer Enlist corn in Enlist corn, right? You never could before, but as Ben was talking about, when we're switching, when we're going from a Yield Guard system to an Enlist corn system, you certainly are going to be able to kill it that first year, and that you would make this switch. Does that make sense, guys?
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right. So here's the one thing I really want to put an exclamation point on this, and I'm gonna start out with a statement. Dead weeds don't breed, and it's a little raunchy, but it gets the point across. If I kill a weed, it can't become resistant, and we got resistance for a couple reasons to glyphosate, because number one, we were using lower rates. It was working pretty effective. But the lower rates let a few slip through, and those few that slipped through were the ones that were resistant. And pretty soon our whole population was resistant to glyphosate. And we didn't use other chemistries with our glyphosate. We just relied on glyphosate. We know for a fact that we will have 2,4-D resistance if we don't come to the table with a full program approach, a full systems approach, which means start with a clean field with your burn down, whether that's Enlist One, Enlist Duo, or whatever burn down program you're using. And then get a broad spectrum pre-on. If you want to be serviced by if you want it to be a Corteva acre and qualify for Corteva service, then you need to use a Corteva pre. And the good news is we've got the best pre's in the marketplace. A lot of full-time Keystone, sure start sold down in that neck of the woods, and some Resicor for that matter too. I'm a big fan of Resicor. I like Resicor. And then we follow that. So we think of the modes of actions we've already been putting there. With Resicor, for example, that's 3 herbicides in there. It's got the mesotrione, it's got the acetochlor, and then it's got the stinger. Acetochlor means surpass or sold under multiple names, and it's got stinger. So we got 3 modes of action there that are really good, effective ways to control weeds. Then we follow that with either Enlist glyphosate or Enlist Liberty. Now we can spray this corn with Liberty, and now we've added two more modes of action. And of course, if you used Assure, like we were talking, that FOP, you could be using a 3rd mode of action. Now, while I'm on the subject, maybe you're using the Assure at the full 12-ounce rate just to kill some foxtail, just because maybe you don't have volunteer corn, but you want some Assure in there for help on foxtail. So bottom line is, again, dead weeds don't breed. We've got to keep these fields clean. And I'm just going to say this. I'm not picking on anybody, and I don't want anybody to feel bad because I know chemicals aren't free. But I'm just, the people that don't do this well in either corn or beans or both are going to be the ones that get weed resistance first. And they'll be the ones that lose the ability to use Enlist technology, and that'll be on their acres. And that, to me, will be a terrible thing because there's not another alternative to it out there that's acceptable in my mind. So anyway, a program approach in corn. I think I gave that probably enough emphasis, but that's how important it is to us. Cool thing about the Enlist is you can spray that Enlist herbicide up to 30 inches in your corn. You can put a quart of 2,4-D on that corn up to 30-inch tall. Never could you do anything like that with 2,4-D in corn before. And the power of that with the water hemp acres that you guys have down there, it's huge.
Let's talk about that just a little bit, if I may ask a question there. What happens with corn when you spray 30-inch tall corn with an amine or an ester? Where is the previous restriction at?
If it's not Enlist corn?
Correct.
Well, so great question. I probably could have thrown a picture in there because we have some people that probably don't remember this because we're going back a few years. It wasn't too long ago, 30, 40 years ago, not that too long for somebody like me anyway, that we used 2,4-D extensively in our corn because we didn't have a lot of options. And we always pushed it late. By late, over 6, you really wanted to be done spraying 8-inch corn. And what happened was the corn would lean, the corn would gooseneck, the corn would get brittle. The taller it got, it got worse, and it could just get brittle and break off with the wind or any movement of tillage across the field. And the other thing, we get fused brace roots. It's an auxin herbicide, so it has this growth response to it. So when you have the Enlist trait in there that you have in these Power Core Enlist hybrids that you're offering, this doesn't happen anymore. And instead of 8-inch corn being the latest you could apply 2,4-D, now we can go to 30 with complete crop safety.
And then it kind of looks like from that slide with drop nozzles, you can go 30 to 48. So, that's dragging you very far into the season for rescue options, which I think is probably the way the majority of the growers would be using the Enlist, is as a rescue option for something if they would have weeds sneak through on their first post, which is typically happening in that 6 to 8-inch tall range, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're suggesting that they've got a great pre-herbicide program that might have already controlled the vast majority of the weeds, more power to them. More power to them. We don't want, I don't want somebody that's had great luck with one of these pre-herbicides think that they've got to go out there and spray Enlist on that field if they don't have weeds. If you're making your program work today, keep using that program. And with the PowerCore Enlist, you got this great safety net that you just talked about.
And the label specifically for that form of 2,4-D is Enlist 1, correct?
Correct. The only herbicides you'll be able to use on Enlist corn and be on label to go. You could still use the old 2,4-D at the younger stages, but you'd be crazy to do it because of all the risk. But the label definitely is Enlist 1 or Enlist Duo on that corn.
Maybe you have a spot where you want to talk about this at a different point, Scott, but is this a good time to talk about I assume for killing weeds, it's killing weeds. You always want that Enlist 1 herbicide mixed with either glyphosate or glufosinate, correct, for the maximum control for water hemp?
I think that's a great question. Again, to be a Corteva serviced acre and just to be doing the right thing for your acres and preventing weed resistance. I'm going to show you some data here in a little bit that shows you how highly effective 2,4-D is by itself. But we never recommend Enlist 1 or Enlist Duo is 2 modes of action. So Enlist Duo could go by itself. We never recommend Enlist 1 unless it has glyphosate or glufosinate with it. And that's true in either corn or soybeans. And the reason we do that is it gives us 2 modes of action and stops weed resistance before it starts. And please don't think just because somebody told you all these weeds are glyphosate resistant that glyphosate doesn't help. I'm going to show you the data here in a little bit. Glyphosate helps Enlist kill glyphosate resistant weeds. I said that when we had our spring Cup of Joe meeting, and I'll say it again. Great question. Now this on the left is corn you don't want. That's corn that did not have the Enlist trait. So it wasn't PowerCore Enlist, and it was treated with you'll see that fancy word there, quizalofop. That's the common name for a Sure 2 herbicide. Now on the right is Enlist corn. And of course, this is what we would expect, full immunity, full tolerance, beautiful looking field of corn. So remember, a Sure is a corn killer. That's why it's used. In this case, with the Enlist trait, we don't have to worry about it. So, and it also a Sure is a grass killer. At the high rates of a Sure, which is like 12 ounces, we can start getting some foxtail control and other grasses that you have out there. So if you remember, and some of you might have seen this, it doesn't happen very often, but the Enlist corn and Enlist soybeans, they metabolize the 2,4-D that gets in them. It just doesn't roll off them and not go in them. It goes in the plant. And that plant has to take a minute and go, oh, hey, hang on here a second. Let me chew through this Enlist 1 you just sprayed on me. And so you might see soybeans droop for a day. And then the next morning they're fine. This is always the case, never a problem. Same thing with corn is it might show a little leaning response out there after you sprayed it. This is some pretty good sized corn here. And I don't expect to see this very often, but I don't want anybody to be surprised if they do see it. So we've talked a little bit about the corn side. I just want to remind you, and Ben, you brought up the question a second ago here about, that we always spray Enlist with either glyphosate or glufosinate. We recommend if you want to be serviced by Corteva, you need to use a Corteva pre on soybeans as well, followed by, Enlist plus glyphosate or glufosinate. And so, again, start with a clean field. This is soybeans, E3 soybeans. We call them, it's E3 in soybeans. It's Enlist corn. When we talk about Enlist corn, it's how we refer to them. And here we're talking about Abby Ingalls is our territory manager in Southeast Iowa. Mason Lewis is a little further west of her, and then over in Illinois and Missouri we have people too. But they're going to be recommending a lot of different pre-products that we have. We have more pre-soybean herbicides than anybody, and we have programs with individual retailers designed to be very comprehensive on water hemp. And I cannot overemphasize enough for folks to put out the best pre-program that they can put out on corn and beans. You got to take your best shot up front if you want to know you're going to be able to have season-long weed control out there. So just a little bit on soybeans. This slide gets a little busy. What this is a rate control slide, and it shows how our products work at a half rate and a full rate, and then with the addition of glyphosate. And you see here that even a pint, and people used to use a pint all the time for burn down, right? But you look how much better a quart. The rate we recommend of Enlist is always a quart, never any less. The silliest thing a grower could do would be to use less than this, because again, you're just asking for trouble with weed resistance. And the other silliest thing would be is that it didn't tank mix glyphosate or glufosinate with it. And that's what this data shows you. So for example, let's take our number one weed, and I can't see because my screen is overlapping it right now, but I think I can remember the data. Water hemp, I think you see at a pint in yellow there, it's only 76% control. And then help me out, Ben, at 32 ounces, is it about 86% control?
85.
85. And then when we add glyphosate, it jumps up to 91, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
And then if you go down below and look at glyphosate resistant water hemp, this I can see. These are ones that water hemp, we know that glyphosate won't kill it. Again, 77 on a pint, 88 with a quart, and it goes up to 93 when we add the glyphosate. Hold on now. How can glyphosate help me kill glyphosate-resistant water hemp? It does. The two go together very well. Enlist glyphosate with a quart of MSO for an additive is my favorite program. For those of you out there that are Enlist glufosinate, Enlist Liberty, that's a great program as well too. I won't get into that unless you want me to. So look how powerful 2,4-D is by itself. And then look how much more powerful it is with the addition of glyphosate or glufosinate. All right, just a little bit on weed height. One problem we have, and folks listening to this call, I understand how tough it is to have 6-inch weeds out there. I mean, we have 6-inch weeds for about 2 days, and then they're 10 and 12 inches, and then the next week they're 2 foot. So it's a moving target. It's hard to get small weeds, but trust me, small weeds are easier to kill. And that's what this data shows, is how much our water hemp control drops off as the weeds get larger. The one thing we do always recommend, though, is the best additives you can put with it. So we want crop oil or we want MSO in there with that Enlist. And that'll kick that control up in 2 situations: when the weeds get bigger and when the weeds get hardened off if it turns dry. Regardless, try to get weeds sprayed before they get 6 inches tall, and you'll be a lot happier. Here's the reason why. This is a water hemp plant, and those little red circles are growing points. And you can see a 2-inch water hemp's got 9, and by the time it gets to 4 to 6, it's doubled the growing points. Those growing points have to have herbicide on them to control it, to control and kill them. Systemically, the products do move systemically in the plant, but really we need to get coverage on all those growing points when we spray. And I'll talk about that here in just a second in terms of the coverage aspect. Just some reminders. Any questions yet?
I think that's a very, very valuable slide.
Yeah, this explains why you say, I sprayed it and it didn't work. Well, you didn't get it covered. is really what you should have said.
Great point. Here's the benefits of multiple herbicides. I threw this slide in. On the left is Liberty by itself with our metolachlor-based Everprex, good post-residual. Everprex is, like dual 2. You can put it in the tank with your Enlist to give you some overlapping residual. And then on the right is that same field when we went with Enlist 1 and Liberty, dual modes of action. And certainly better weed control. You'll see this time and time again. You don't have to go up to Minnesota to take a picture. Sorry for the barking lab in the background there. He was excited that he was on Cup of Joe this morning too. So what I couldn't be on your show, guys, without talking a little bit about this. If you want to kill weeds with Enlist, spray them small and cover them up. That's the secret. How do I get coverage? I run high pressure. I run high gallonage. I use the right nozzles. And I probably putting in crop oil or MSO. I am putting crop oil or MSO in there. And we know now, we've been doing this for 4 years with Enlist, whether it's corn or soybeans, we know the key to killing weeds is coverage. Take that sprayer back. We're not as concerned what's downwind. Remember, downwind, we can have corn, soybeans, and alfalfa. Be really extremely careful if you're around a nursery or a vineyard or housing development or something like that. You always have to do that, regardless of what herbicide you're spraying. But with Enlist, we've got freedom to spray again. And we want pressure, we want gallonage, and we want coverage. One thing I'm going to kind of rock everybody's world here a little bit. When it turned hot and dry in parts of Iowa last year, and it was hot and dry, and they were out what I call monster killing. They were trying to kill some big dog water hemp. Enlist glyphosate worked better at 20 gallons an acre water. We always recommend 20 gallons of water with Enlist glufosinate, but even glyphosate responded to that extra water. This is about the end of my talk, and I'm going to go back to the weed resistance point. And, newsflash, weeds are just waiting for you to take your foot off the gas. And that's so true. It's so true. Folks, we spend so much time that value of your farmland, the value of the seed you plant, the fertility, the equipment, spend the money on the pre-herbicide, the most broad spectrum pre you can get. It's got to have a good water hemp component in it, either Zidua or Valor or Authority that are in one of those is in all the Corteva pre's, or other you're using a competitive pre, and then broad spectrum post spray. Broad spectrum post spray. Of course, in corn, it's going to be not those other herbicides I just mentioned. It's going to be more of the Resicor, the Sure Starts, the Keystones, the full times. So the people that don't control these weeds effectively on their farm are going to be the ones that deal with resistance, unfortunately. So please be aggressive about your weed control. So with that, guys, darn, I'm so excited you invited me on here. It's so exciting what you guys are doing with corn and where you're headed with this Power Core Enlist. It really is. And so you think if you got questions or anything that we can further discuss, I'm right here.
Scott, I have one question that's not related to the Power Core or the Enlist E3 system. I know the fourth quarter of this year, the EPA is going to review dicamba, for the endangered species, just like they did with Enlist 1 and Enlist Dual last year. Any comments about that?
Well, you're right. The product is under review, and they're asking for public comments on this. And dicamba is just a wonderful herbicide. I'm never going to be anyone to say that it doesn't kill weeds. It kills a lot of weeds. Problem is with dicamba, unlike Enlist, we just can't keep it in place. and that off-target movement, the ability of that product to volatilize and move around has caused a lot of problems. In addition to the fact that soybeans are extremely susceptible, the most susceptible thing there are if they don't have the dicamba trait. And then so regarding, so that's caused a lot of consternation in agriculture. Will they hasten the cutoff date? Will they move that June 20th cutoff date to an earlier date in Iowa? I don't know. That's a question being asked. I think that'd be a response. In terms of other species and other impacts, I saw something, Dr. Bob Hartzer from Iowa State had posted something on Twitter, and I think it was last year, but he was talking about riding through a town on his bike and seeing some messed up, twisted up trees and shrubs and stuff that he was going through, and he suspected it was dicamba movement. So when you got chemical trespass of that nature, that can be pretty serious. Again, wonderful tool. We're certainly not advocating that the tool shouldn't be out there for usage, but I think maybe maybe prudent to look at some earlier dates for cutting off applications.
Appreciate that, Scott, because it's something that's coming, and we'll have to see how it affects the industry. So we always got to be looking over the next hill.
And that's a big one, Joe. You're so right, because and that's quite frankly, I mean, if put on my sales hat here just a little bit. I mean, that's the power of Enlist corn right there that you guys are talking about here this morning. What we're all talking about is the fact that we don't have to use a dicamba based system there. And so hopefully we have this tool around for the dicamba tool for at least another year as you guys ramp up and fill that lineup up and of this great germplasm that you're selling within PowerCore Enlist trade.
Perfect. Well, usually we have a few questions at the end here, but you really did a nice job, Scott, covering all of the tips and tricks on how to make this trait work really well. We will probably link to the sheet that you had with you and your colleagues that handle the Enlist trait out in the field, or you're the Enlist field specialist. So we'll link to that if you or one of our listeners want to get a hold of you and have any additional questions. But I'd like to thank you for all the extra time that you have provided us today. And this is the first of the Cup of Joe episodes where we deep dive in. Here in the next couple episodes, we'll definitely look at what the germplasm is carrying, but the weed control and the insect protection is definitely something that's important when it comes to talking about what Mershman corn is going to look like with the PowerCore trait. So thank you very much, Scott, and we appreciate your time.
Yeah, guys, it's sorry I'm not down there in person. I feel kind of lame for stand up here in Adel, but I could have got 5:30 and been down there with you folks. But, you asked me again and challenged me to come in person, because I want to see all these spotless semis and everything going in and out of there that I keep hearing about.
It's the truth. So we appreciate it, Scott.
Thank you, folks. I really appreciate it too. Thank you. I'm gonna leave now. Thank you. Take care.
Yep. So long.
Well, it's always awesome to have Scott on. He's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to figuring out what it takes to kill weeds. Yeah, Lynn, what do we got going on this week?
We know a lot of action going on in the warehouse. We still have a little bit of wheat going out in the countryside. So for those individuals that haven't given up yet, we still have some availability and some products to get to you. And the biggest thing I wanted to highlight for this week is Alex and Carly in the marketing department have really got after it on getting test plots loaded to the website. So if you go to the website, go to the Mershman Advantage, and then go to the Yield Data tab, you can check out the plot results for this year. And that's something that we're continually getting some more information coming in, so that's changing every day. So if you haven't looked lately, be sure to check that out.
Well, I guess I'll wrap this thing up. It's a pretty long episode, but to me it was I was on the edge of my seat because that information is unbelievable. One of the things that came up here in the last few days is the United States Department of Agriculture is going to review what they call the SBOC. And the SBOC is soybeans of other colors, and they're looking at changing the description of number one yellow soybeans so it's not so strict, so that, because these SBOC, and we've seen that this fall, we're seeing more of it. And off-colored soybeans, and some farmers are getting docked for it. Some folks are blaming the Enlist trait, which is not accurate. It's in all soybeans in different genetics and whatnot. But anyhow, they're looking at taking that away for next fall, and there'll be a comment period. And as soon as it opens up, we'll let you know. Then you can put your 2 cents in and get this regulation or standard change to where we are today in today's world. So that's good news. So to conclude, next week, this coming week is Thanksgiving. And, we have so many things to be thankful for. And I read a study one time that said, who are the people that are happiest? And they are the people that are grateful. So this is an opportunity for all of us to be happy, not only for our family and for what we have, and we live in a great country and the freedoms that we have, but we have so many positive things. So this Thanksgiving, be grateful, and I'll bet you'll be happy. And so that brings me to the corny jokes. I figured I'd focus on Thanksgiving jokes, and so those of you that are Star Wars fans, I had to bring this one on. What did Han Solo say to Luke Skywalker on Thanksgiving? What did Han Solo say to Luke Skywalker on Thanksgiving? May the fork be with you. Fork, okay. If I have to explain them, they're not, we're in trouble, aren't we? All right. This one here is for the men, okay? You overdid it on Thanksgiving when you cut yourself shaving and you bleed gravy.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And the last one it's about my family. My family told me to stop telling Thanksgiving jokes, but I told them I couldn't do it cold turkey. So
Finally got one on the last one.
I'll try to go cold turkey. Okay. Anyhow, hope you have a great Thanksgiving in the coming week and get a little bit of opportunity to spend some time with your family and enjoy a great meal. Thanks to farmers who make food extremely available to us in this country, and we're so appreciative. And we'll see you next week. Take care.